You're listening to The Streaming Wars, the podcast that discusses all of the latest happenings regarding your favorite streaming services. Find out which service is winning the war this time around.
Hello everyone and welcome to the latest episode of The Streaming Wars. I'm Dustin and Tony is with me, and today I have a special topic that we're going to talk about. One of the things that we have mentioned a bunch of different times is a variety of the niche services that are available as far as streaming services go. And today we're actually going to be discussing some of those and why they matter and why they're important. There's actually going to be a bunch of these services that we're going to talk about that are linked to a larger company. And if you've listened to us for a long period of time, you'll know which company we're talking to and why they have no desire to necessarily turn the switch off on some of these smaller services, at least for the time being. So why do niche services matter? Well, the biggest reason they matter is because
we love small business.
I wish that was true. But it really comes down to, so obviously we all know that there's massive services that offer an insane amount of content. You know, you've got your Netflix, you got your Prime Video, Hulu to a degree, you will have HBO Max, Disney Plus has a ton of content. There's, I mean, in some ways you could consider Apple TV Plus kind of a niche service just because the amount of content that they have, but they are a larger company that has a lot more money to throw at content creation. So they're not one of the ones obviously we're going to be discussing, but the idea is that there's a lot of services out there that exist that for maybe $5 to $8 per month, you can get a very select group of content for you as a consumer. And why this matters to, why this is so important to a larger content company that creates content is the money. It all comes down to the money. One of the things I don't think a lot of people understand is when a content company like, let's say, Discovery or Disney or Warner Media creates content for cable channels, they basically have to pay for that content for the cable channels, but when they actually put it on cable, they have to then sell ads to make money back. But then there's also the part where the cable companies, certain channels, they have to make money on having those on. So there's, whenever you see a add-on channel package where you're getting a select group of channels. A lot of those channels could be very niche. You know, you've got certain companies offer a kids package or a sports package or, maybe a movie lovers package or something like that. And those packages, the cable company will pay more money for, or they will charge you more money for. But part of the reason is because the fees associated with those, the cable company has to pay those smaller channels money, and those smaller channels get some money, but they're not on everybody's package. The other part of it is that as a content creator, what is the easiest way to make money? To have a middleman or have no middleman? And obviously the answer when it comes to any business is having no middleman. Because if you can do the middleman's job yourself, and you can save yourself a lot of cost that is associated with having that middleman involved. So by creating a smaller service, you can get money directly from the consumer. That means more money in your pocket, less money in somebody else's pocket, like the cable company. You can also in turn get a select group of people that appreciate the type of content that you're creating, and in turn they will pay money for that content. And as long as you continue to produce quality content that falls in lines with whatever your customer base is, you'll get that. We've talked about on different episodes how like Warner Media and AT&T and Xandr are working hand in hand to kind of create content that hits the different demographics, but also they will use the data that Xandr extracts from the viewing patterns from customers to create more content in the future, and then they can actually use that to actually go and sell content to other providers as well, because they know what the content that viewers want is. So you also have that data. These smaller services, they have that data, and they can see, well, what as far as what we have in our back catalog, what's really popular. Oh, this movie is getting an insane amount of people watching it. Maybe we should reboot that, or maybe we should make a TV series about that, or something to that regard. So the thing is, not only is it about the money, but it is about also having that core audience that will support you no matter what, because you create a specific type of content. content. One of the things that I didn't even know existed until about maybe 2 years ago was that Hallmark had a streaming service, and I think they still do. I'm not familiar with it enough to know if it's still around or anything, and it's not appearing on the list that I'm looking at.
Oh, it is. I looked at it for my mom because she loves Hallmark Christmas movies. Really, just Hallmark movies. But she was looking into it for the Christmas movies that were coming out.
Yeah.
And yes, the audience, if you love Christmas movies, they have a crap ton of them. So it's our unofficial spoiler warning, ad placement.
Yes, but basically it's called Hallmark Channel Everywhere, and it's $4.99 per month if you pay annually, or $5.99 if you pay month to month. But you get all the content that they create, and they have created an insane amount of content every single year. They create like 30 something Christmas movies or holiday movies that they offer on the Hallmark Channel if you have that through your cable provider, but if you don't, that is another option. But the point is, there's a bunch of people who will want to watch that stuff. My wife watches a number of Hallmark-esque shows on Netflix. You can tell Netflix has created specific holiday movies because the stuff on through Hallmark is very popular. It doesn't just end with Hallmark. I mean, you also have services like the Wwe Network, which specifically focuses on sports entertainment / wrestling, which is it's $10 a month, and you get all of the pay-per-views. And they moved from a pay-per-view system where they had their stuff streaming on cable channels, and they were charging upwards of like $60 for a pay-per-view, to charging only $10 a month for their streaming service. You can see there's a huge difference in price. Part of it is through the streaming service, they're getting all of that money, while the pay-per-view, they're actually splitting a lot of the money with the cable provider as well, and they're not making as much money. And if they get enough of the subscribers at the $10 level, it can go just as high as what they would need to have to still be profitable at the amount of money that they were making prior to, the existence of the service. There is a number of other ones. Most of them are smaller. You've got, I'm going to run through a list in a little bit, but there's different ones. There's, that focus on content for the family. There's ones that focus on, specific genres of movies and things like that. But the whole idea of this is that a lot of these smaller services, they will continue to exist because they don't need to be super successful. They don't have to be as successful as Netflix. They're not every single month or every single 3 months when they're reporting their quarterly earnings. They're not talking about how, we have 150 million subscribers, but last month we lost 1 million subscribers. They're not looking at the numbers as that high. Now, there obviously is certain numbers that they need to hit in order to have, to be successful so that they keep going. But there's also the ability of, having different avenues of making money. Some of these services, they could go an ad route if they wanted to. I know Discovery has been talking for what seems to be forever about launching their own service outside of the other smaller ones that they already have as far as their on-demand option and things like that. They've been talking about it for ages, about how they're going to launch this massive Discovery one with all of the Discovery content from all of the different channels that they have, TLC and HGTV and all of these other channels. And they have this massive amount of content that people will watch, and people are watching because you're seeing the larger services like Netflix and Prime Video create content that screams, this is content that I typically see on these other, these other network channels. So if they can create a service that people could subscribe to and isn't too expensive, people are more willing to subscribe to it and watch the content, and it's just beneficial. The other part of it is the smaller services, they cost less money. People are more inclined to look at it and say, oh, $5 a month, that's like a cup of expensive coffee, but a cup of coffee, that's not that much. I'll do that every single month, and I'll be able to watch, as long as I watch, some trivial number of hours of content, then it's well worth the amount of money that I pay. And honestly, I've looked at that for a number of different services that I personally subscribe to. I look at it and say, okay, well, I'm only paying X amount of money per month. It's really not that much as long as I'm utilizing it every single month. And as soon as it gets to a point where you're not utilizing it, then there's no reason to keep it around. However, there are customers who do keep it around and do just keep paying the subscription fee every single month. And those are the customers that the content providers really, really enjoy, because they're just making money and not having to really give them anything in return. But I want to go through the list of the services, but I don't want to have this a completely one-sided conversation, or I should say a one-sided monologue. So without knowing a whole lot about price or anything like that, any of the services, I mean, we've been doing this now for a couple of months, and there's been some services that have popped up, and I've either mentioned them or they've popped up in articles and things like that. Has there been any niche services that you've heard about, and once you know what type of content they deliver, you are more inclined to check it out?
Yeah, I think the only one that really fits my taste is, okay, well, besides, traditional HBO and then I guess Showtime. Those are niche, but they're not really niche in terms of the discussion, but they sort of got added into this Verge article. The only one that I have gotten and would get again is the DC Universe, just because I love comics, I love comic book movies, I just love all that different stuff. And so that is why I would get it. Now, I only got it to watch the first season of Titans, and I would have kept it if I had an iPad, so I could keep reading the comics, but it's really hard to read comics on your computer. So I haven't gotten it again because I'm waiting for HBO Max to kind of incorporate all this content. If HBO Max wasn't going to come out, I would totally subscribe to DC Universe, because I think honestly, you've used it, Dustin. It's a very well thought out app, and it works. It's simple. It works. Now, there's not that much content besides old reruns of different things, but it's a solid app. And if Warner Media took DC Universe as a base to start their new streaming platform, I would totally be okay with that. Yeah, that's the only one that's really niche that I would actually use. I
have used DC Universe, and I think the one thing that also can set a lot of these services apart from the bigger ones is that when it is smaller and you don't necessarily have as much content, you have to figure out unique ways of delivering the content. Meaning, what else can you provide? There's a lot of opportunities. One of the things that DC Universe, let me just back up. So I've been a subscriber to DC Universe since they first launched. I think it's a great service in the sense of what they are currently. I did have some issues with the amount of content they had initially and how things have kind of changed back and forth over the past year. But I think that the changes that they've in placed within the first 6 months of the service launching and them utilizing and seeing how people are using the service, they've been really smart about changing what they've been doing.
Well, it came out before they announced HBO Max.
Oh, yes.
And the whole entire redesign. So it had a mission that kind of got subverted by a different brand. So yeah, I was complaining about the content at first, but then you hear HBO Max was coming out and it was like, oh, okay, well, the value proposition of DC Universe to me revolves around, yeah, you get the shows, but you also get a bunch of old stuff that we enjoy as comic book people, old shows that were nice. And then basically the whole entire back catalog of DC's, comics proper, everything up until a year ago. And that alone, I think, is worth the subscription price.
Right.
Going on DC Universe, little tangent here, but given HBO Max and then coming in and playing this streaming partner, I can see all of the, the content, media content, television, movies get shipped over to HBO Max, but then DC Universe will still be alive just as a, online comics subscription. And I think that it's better than currently Comixology for comics. So to me, that's where the value proposition of DC Universe lies in the comics, not necessarily in the other content that it provides.
I agree. And I think that's the biggest thing, is that wasn't something that was a huge focus when they launched the service. So just to give not even a 2 minute, maybe a minute long synopsis. They launched in September of 2018. And when they launched, they initially had one original show that they were going to be having within the first month, which was a show called Titans. And it was a live action superhero show. And similar in the vein of, the shows that you typically see on the CW, but the other part of it was that it was on a streaming service, so they don't have to adhere to television ratings, which they took full advantage of. Yes.
In the trailer that would never happen on the CW.
Yes. So there was that part of it, but that was the extent of the content that they had. It was just one new show, and they were releasing on a weekly basis. Then as time progressed, They announced at New York Comic Con, which was just it was within a month of them launching the service, that they had plans to do one new original show per week every single week, and then in the fall of 2019 they were going to start doing 2 shows per week, and then just continue to build up the amount of content that they actually have. That has all shifted because around the time all of this happened was also around the time that AT&T bought Warner Media, and everything started to shift because of the people in charge and the focus behind what they were planning on doing with the company. This was also around the same exact time that we started hearing rumblings about them doing some sort of streaming service, but nobody knew exactly what it was going to be. Everybody kept talking about a 3-tiered system where you could tack things on similar to the way Prime Video, you can add channels to your existing Prime Video subscription. It's all been changed. Everything's changed. HBO Max as a concept has changed insanely different from the initial reports from 2018, from the point, of what they've announced at the investor presentation back in October. So the thing is, DC Universe had to adjust as well because of what was happening higher up the chain within the parent company. Now we've got DC content also coming to HBO Max. There's content that will be on DC Universe and HBO Max with the 2nd season of Doom Patrol. There's other stuff, like there's a show called Stargirl, which is also going to be appearing on CW in addition to DC Universe. So there's a lot of shifting going on with what's happening. But one of the main things that they did was they figured out a way to also not focus so heavily on the original content, especially once they realized they weren't going to be able to keep churning out as much original content as they were because of what was happening higher up the chain with the parent company. They started to realize, well, one of the other things that people are using a lot on the service is comics. And at the time, there was a select curated library of comics that was available to watch, but then they announced that they were expanding it, and then they basically put the entire back catalog of comics. And it's significantly cheap. Well, not significantly, but it's a couple dollars cheaper than what Marvel offers. The same exact thing, but you also get the some original content, some of the media content. So the idea is that there's a benefit. There's something else that they can do on top of just having media that you can watch, on the service. So that's a unique proposition for some of these content creators, is what else can we do to also utilize these customers that we have, these people who are paying a monthly subscription. What else can we do for them that isn't necessarily going to cost as much as producing, multiple new series or movies and things like that? Let me run through some of these services. So there's Brit Box, which focuses on a number of British television shows, including Doctor Who and some other classic British series. It's costs about $6.99 a month. There's Boomerang, which is classic cartoons from Hanna-Barbera, Looney Tunes, MGM, a lot of those libraries. Then you also have a number of newer shows that they've released as well. They also license some other shows outside of the core stuff that's part of the Warner Media library as well. That costs $4.99 a month. You've got Crunchyroll, which is a service that focuses on a lot of anime tales and the ability to read manga or streaming titles that are not appearing elsewhere here in the United States. That's $7.99 a month. DC Universe, we already talked about, that's $79 a month. You've got Plex, which we talked about a couple weeks ago on an episode. They just expanded, so I'm not going to get into the details of this because I think these are outdated, but it's a movie service where they have a ton of movies that you can watch. You have Shudder, which focuses on horror content, whether it be TV shows or movies. That's $5.99 a month. You've got the Criterion channel, which is $10.99 a month, which is basically a service for cinephiles looking for classic films and additional material on beloved titles. You've got Canopy, which is a free service that has a large catalog of classic movies, and but is ad supported. They also have a number of independent titles as well. Then you've got You've got the sports services like MLB TV, which starts at $24.99 a month. You've got NBA League Pass, which starts at $6.99 per month. You've got NFL Sunday Ticket, NHL TV. There's different sports ones, but then you've also got Nick. There's other things like Nick Hits, which is a channel that you can add to your Prime Video subscription, which is Nickelodeon shows. There's PBS Kids, which is a free service that has all kinds of kids content from PBS. There's a lot of different services out there, but the whole, and then obviously like we talked about, there's the Hallmark one. There's ones that aren't even appearing on this list that we're going off of from Verge that I'm aware of, like Rooster Teeth and the Hallmark one. So there's a ton of other ones. There's the WWE Network. There's Curiosity Stream. There's other channels that you can add. There's a variety of different services. But the entire idea is that if you are a fan of something very specific, you like classic cartoons, you like cartoons from when you were a kid. Some of us are the age where you would be you watched a number of different shows on Nickelodeon during the peak of Nickelodeon producing a number of cartoons. If you like horror films, if you like, classic films that are very independent, or you're independent films, you're looking for stuff that maybe doesn't get a huge, not the blockbuster type films, but other things. If you like comics, there's a lot of different services out there that offer a variety of different content. So if you have you can seek out those specific services. But the important thing is that and this is what I was going to get back to. So out of all those ones that I mentioned, Crunchyroll, Rooster Teeth, DC Universe, those are all part of HBO, and Boomerang are all part of HBO, the same parent company as HBO, and will be HBO Max. And I think there's actually a couple of other ones too, but the idea is that a lot of people have said, okay, so once HBO Max launches, what will happen to all those other services? And I think the key thing to remember is the price points are extremely low for the amount of content that you're getting. So Boomerang is my go-to because it's just media that they offer there. While DC Universe offers comics, Crunchyroll offers manga, Rooster Teeth has other stuff outside of media as well. Boomerang just offers media. It's just cartoons. And while they have original cartoons specifically for the service, it's just cartoons. And that is one where you look at it and say, okay, so will all of that cartoon content get rolled into what they offer on HBO Max? And the answer is no, not at least for the immediate future, because they've said that the HBO Max library is going to be curated. There will be some of it on there, but it's not all going to be there. You could look at it like I looked at it initially when they said this and say, oh, so I'll still have to subscribe to this other service in addition if I want to watch this content. And that would be very true, and that is the case. But the other part of it is that if you're not subscribing to HBO Max and you're just subscribing to these other services, that also means your value proposition could actually go up, because I would imagine some of those DC Universe shows or some of those DC comic shows that are going to be popping up on HBO Max, I imagine they could also pop up on DC Universe around the same time, because it's not an extremely out of the realm of possibility. If people wanted to keep DC Universe around as a standalone service, why not add content that you also have from other places, because you can make it available on these other services that you have. Boomerang, they're creating new cartoons and children's content for HBO Max. There's no reason you couldn't also have that content pop up over on Boomerang. So the people who can't spend $15 a month for HBO Max, you still get some of the content, not all of it, and you don't get the access to all the other HBO content that they have, but you could still get a better value proposition for sticking around with these other services as well. The important thing is, if you subscribe to some of the niche services, whether or not they're part of Warner Media or whether or not they're something else, the reality of it is, as long as you get your value out of whatever it is you're paying per month, there's no reason to stop. And I honestly believe that over time we're going to get we're going to get even more niche services as time progresses. Some of them will last, some of them won't, but I think the reality of it is that as long as there's a large enough audience for a company to be profitable while having content available on a service, I think it's entirely feasible that it's just going to continue to happen. Is there ever going to be a point where there's too many? Certainly, but it's really going to come down to, does it matter if there's too many, as long as the ones that exist have the audience, have the subscriber base that the content provider needs in order to keep them profitable? I don't think so. So I wouldn't worry about any of the ones that you have shutting down anytime soon. The one downfall, of course, is that a lot of the niche services, they don't hear a lot about how many subscribers they actually have. So you don't have any idea whether or not they're actually profitable or not. Even if you did, it doesn't matter. I mean, it's basically, if you're getting your value for the time being, keep doing it. If you find out that the content is leaving or they're shutting down the service, then by all means, you'll just have to seek content from another provider. So
there you go.
All right, so with all of that being said, that's going to wrap up this rather quick episode. But I wanted to discuss the niche services because I don't think we don't talk about them unless it comes up in the news, and let's be honest, they don't come up in the news all that often. So, all right, so with all of that being said, I hope you guys are enjoying your holidays while we are on break. We'll have new episodes coming back the first full week of January, and there's other episodes while we're on our holiday break that you guys can take a listen to as well. So in addition to heading over to the site and checking out the show notes and the release calendar for all the content on the streaming services, you can also follow us on Twitter and Discord for all the latest articles that we talk about here on the podcast, as well as articles that we don't necessarily talk about on the podcast that we just find really interesting in relation to the streaming wars. You can also follow us on Instagram. That's where you'll find out all the latest announcements whenever we have a new podcast. You can leave us reviews wherever you listen to these podcasts. Those are always greatly appreciated. You can send us an email at thestreamingwars@gmail.com. And with all of that being said, we hope you guys are enjoying your holidays. For Tony and myself, this has been The Streaming Wars, and we'll see you guys next time.
Thanks for listening to The Streaming Wars. Check us out on Twitter and Instagram. Also consider supporting us on Patreon. Links can be found at thestreamingwars.io.